So I'm here in Davos for the second time. Last time I drove up and down each day. This time I've been very lucky to have somewhere to stay with a friend of mine. So why am I here? Actually, it's a great space to connect with people, get to meet people. Some of the LinkedIn posts have been quite successful last year. And this year we're just starting to emerge into the market with new products after what has been an incredibly tough time. And I really want to start challenging what's going on in the world and asking some big questions. It's interesting that Davos this year, the theme is rebuilding trust. And I think for far too many things, actually that's impossible. I mean, I just had a fantastic conversation with a couple of ladies in the Microsoft cafe, and we were talking about the meaning of intimacy, and I was talking about my wife and how the things I miss having been forced to be away from my family are waking up in the morning to a quiet apartment, not being able to hold my wife's hand when I go to bed, and how fundamental that is to who I am today. Not who I once was before I knew what it was like to have somebody who loved me in my life and now. But actually, it's fundamental to everything we're talking about here in Davos as well. Because if they're talking about rebuilding trust in what? How many lies have we been told about how many things? In fact, we don't really have any single source of good information anymore. Whether you like it or not, to some extent, Twitter is just about as good as it gets. LinkedIn, mostly posturing. One of the things I want to change with these videos is actually trying to get people to really engage and really talk, because I think that's the critical thing that we've been missing in so many different ways. And we need to talk. We need to start talking about how are we going to get to where we want to get to? Where do we want to get to? How are we going to get there? Who's going to pay for it? How are they going to pay for it? Who's going to benefit from it? Ultimately, right now, we talk about a society in which old men plant trees that they will never see. How do we rebuild that trust? And actually, too much of it, I think, has gone. And whether you believe in Bitcoin or not, what it did do was awaken a consciousness in the post-global financial crisis context that there is an alternative. And that's been my life's work, building that alternative. So when people talk about rebuilding trust here in Davos, I liken it to an institution or a set of institutions that have cheated on their constituents, that have cheated on their electorate. They've told lies to get into office. They've gotten into office, they've done nothing, they've been unaccountable. You have democratic deficit in the Western world, the like of which we've never seen before. I'm very critical of the UK on social media, because I see that the democratic deficit in the UK is almost as ridiculous as the one that's in Ireland. You have a choice between left and left. Conservative, slightly more inbreeding. Socialist, slightly less. Socialist side, you have all the problems of socialism. But fundamentally, here's the real issue I think we have. We don't know what capitalism is anymore. We think that it's this thing that's actually more like corporatism. And when my son asked me what the difference is between capitalism and socialism, I had to ask what he meant by capitalism. Because actually what we tend to mean is corporatism. And in my opinion, there's no real difference between corporatism and socialism. We all end up sitting in the mud in little boats with a few people sitting in very big pools looking down on the rest of us. How do we change things in such a way that it's not about rebuilding trust? You don't necessarily need trust unless you have an imbalance of power. How do we change that? How do we move from a society in which we have to trust intermediaries to one in which we can trust the message, not the messenger? Well, that was the promise of blockchain. And it's a promise that has been long stated and short on delivery, short on outcome. A lot of reasons for that. And over the next year or two, I hope to go into a lot more of them. But fundamentally, it's even more vital that we understand this. We need to move from an I win, you lose society, that's corporatism, an I win, you lose economy, forgive me, to an I win, you win, we win one. That's capitalism. That's the tide that lifts all boats. And these are exactly the things I'm going to be working on in the year ahead. We've got the Da Vinci Protocol coming out, which is about how do you capitalize and commercialize creative and intellectual property in such a way that you can distribute the royalties fairly to the people who've actually created the value, which isn't actually always the person who bought it or the person who in fact created it in the first place. It's everybody who touches it. Talking about the blockchain side, I've spent a long time trying to work out a way of making all of the pieces work in blockchain, and I think I'm finally there with a fantastic new team. I mentioned this in the post about the Gajumaru. But here's the thing, I can build all of this stuff, we can build all of this stuff, we can do whatever we want in that regard. But if we don't change the way we're talking, the way we're relating to one another, how we're relating to one another, what we're saying, and restore the ideas of free speech, restore the ideas of being able to challenge what's being said, and actually have some real accountability and real responsibility, we're going to go nowhere. I don't think that the institutions that run Davos can rebuild trust. I think they took it too far. I think what happened with COVID, what happened with the global financial crisis before that, what happened with the bailout of the banks in the US I think it was last year, maybe a year before, sorry, forgive me, it's a bit ad hoc, but you know the ones I'm referring to. These all showed us that actually we can't trust the institutions anymore. We need to restore the community, the individual. We need to restore sovereignty to the individual. Sovereignty of data, sovereignty of economic ownership. We need to restore agency to the individual. And to get there, what I intend to do for the year ahead is start to ask some big probing questions. I had been told by a friend of mine some years ago that I wasn't allowed to bring politics into business. But actually I think we have to, and I'll tell you why. My fear is that we are walking into a whole series of choices that we're not consciously making, whether it's AI, machine learning, whatever you want to talk about. There's a lot of things that we're not making conscious decisions about because we're not having real conversations about. For me, one of the transformational moments that I said I have to come out and actually start talking about the things I believe in as much as what I'm trying to do was October 7th. That was the worst terrorist attack in my lifetime, if not ever. It was an ongoing horror. The response that I saw in the cities of Europe where people protested allegedly for the Palestinian people, but the Palestinian people were the ones who Hamas is using as a human shield. And they're calling for genocide from the river to the sea. This profoundly disturbed me. This is not the world that I wanted to pass to my children. And I think all of these things come together. We need to restore our economic agency. We need to make ourselves accountable, responsible, to draw from the Stoic ideas and begin to say that you're responsible for the things that you do, the choices that you make. But equally, to restore that sense of community around the individual and to have real conversations once again. You don't need a PhD or a master's degree to have an opinion. You need to do some reading. You need to do some engagement. You need to listen to people you don't agree with. So all of these things in the year ahead. This is going to be called Chewy Talks, and I'm going to be looking forward to trying to talk about some of the issues I believe in, to raise some of the points around the news flow and ask questions of it, but also to talk about and get other people to come in and talk. And I think I have got some interesting people coming on stream in the weeks ahead. I'm very keen to get more people in, especially if we can do long form discussions, sitting in the same room. It's just not the same on a video. And actually, this year is going to be a huge year for blockchain. I think a lot of the pretenses are going to fall away. I think that the people who weren't in it for the right reasons, a lot of them fell away in 2023. And I think what's left in 2024 is beginning to show real promise. The Gajumaru, the blockchain that we're going to release in the middle of this year, that is going to blow people's socks off. It's everything that blockchain should have been from the start. And I'm really looking forward to taking everybody on this journey with me, and thank you for your time.